Welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Betty Chen. Since Biden and his administration assumed office, Southeast Asia has emerged as a critical battleground for the U.S.-China rivalry. Traditionally, China's geopolitical sway in the region, ranging from economic and trade assets to multifaceted investments, has been perceived as surpassing that of the U.S. However, the U.S. maintains a systematic advantage in military influence. In today's episode, we'll explore the ramifications and effects on ASEAN brought by this continuing competition between the U.S. and China. Joining us today are Yeh-chung, National Chengchi University College of International Affairs Professor and Vice Dean, and Chiew-Ping, East Asian International Relations Caucus co-founder and National Chengchi University Institute of International Relations Visiting Fellow. A warm welcome to both of you on the show. Since President Biden assumed office, the United States has seemingly taken a more proactive approach in managing its relations with the 10 ASEAN countries as compared to the Trump era. For example, Biden introduced the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, IPEF, established smaller alliances with Southeast Asian nations, such as the Philippines, and crafted distinct diplomatic strategies for different countries. So let's start with today's talk. Do you believe that Biden's multifaceted efforts over the past 4 years have enabled the U.S. to match the influence that you can see that China has cultivated over the years? What's your take on this, Professor Liu?
Yes, I think I totally agree with the argument that the Biden administration actually put a lot of efforts in trying to bringing the states back in to this region. And I think to a certain degree, it is quite successful in terms of its strategy. Because traditionally, we tend to see the ASEAN countries, we try to categorize them, all of them, into two categories based on geopolitical analysis. So, for example, there are so-called sea powers, which include Indonesia, Malaysia, Brunei, the Philippines, Singapore, and Vietnam. And there are some land powers. For example, namely, you got Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Thailand. In terms of those, the distinguish between the two groups, usually the sea powers are leaning more to the United States in history, and land powers seems to be aligning themselves more with China. But before the Biden administration came in, actually we did witness some sea powers actually were hedging between the United States and China, if not leaning to China, such as the Philippines. And for now, as we can see, there are at least two countries actually adopt a very different strategy vis-a-vis their predecessors. So for example, the Philippines, President Marcos Jr. Actually earlier this year agreed to enhance its security relationship with the United States, even trying to expand the military bases for U.S. to collaborate from 5 bases to 9 bases.
So thank you, Professor Liu. And Professor Hu, I understand that you come from ASEAN, you come from Malaysia. So what's your take on this regarding what Professor Liu said, the land power and sea power, and regarding some change in the positions or the attitudes towards becoming from pro-China to pro-US? What's your take on this, Professor Hu?
Yeah, so in Malaysia's defense white paper, we have a line that says geography is destiny. So in a way, maritime Southeast Asia and continental Southeast Asia, we actually have no choice but to engage with both the United States and China. So if we lean towards siding with one side, that's actually detrimental to our national interest, whether it is politics or economic, for example. So Biden's approach is more acceptable in comparison to Trump's. So it actually helped repair some of the bilateral relations with Southeast Asian countries. So in that way, it helped enhance the United States' image in Southeast Asia, even though institutionally ASEAN as a whole, the general perception in the United States is that it's not credible enough because it is not action-based. But for ASEAN, it is very important to have consensus with each other, because if we are not united, then we are very easily swayed by one or other great power that would divide us, and that would actually create more instability in the region.
So, Professor Hu, you talk about something very important, that is it's consensus-based. That is, for the ASEAN countries, usually they will have to reach an important consensus. So, Professor Lu, what do you think about that? Professor Hu also mentioned that if you only lean towards one side, either one, it's going to be detrimental to their country. And what's your view on this?
Yes, actually, there is another country also very indicative when it comes to the relationship between ASEAN countries and the United States, Vietnam. That is the case. So in the past few years, actually, Vietnam has been trying to engage with both the United States and China. And beginning last year, actually, Vietnam and the United States agreed to elevate their bilateral relationship from comprehensive partnership to comprehensive strategic partnership. This is another indication because for those two countries, they used to be foes during the Vietnam War. But right now, they are trying to engage with each other so that they can better equip themselves to the changing environment in the Indo-Pacific region. And even more so, as we can see, I agree with Dr. Hu's comments that for most ASEAN countries, they are still trying to remain some flexibility. So for example, Vietnam actually called its diplomacy as bamboo diplomacy, which means it has very strong roots. However, to the practical side, it can be very, very flexible.
So moving on, during President Trump's presidency, actually he was absent from major multilateral summits, for example, APEC or the ASEAN meetings. So this also gives people the impression that maybe Trump does not pay so much attention to the ASEAN countries. Not to mention, under his leadership, he actually withdraw from the TPP back then and now CPTPP, thereby pushing the ASEAN countries closer to China. And the U.S. election is around the corner in November. If Trump comes back to power, how will that impact the situation in ASEAN or change the relations between ASEAN and the U.S.? Professor Hu.
So I think the United States missions in Southeast Asia, so they are the one that maintain the institutional bilateral relations with the United States, for example. So for Singapore, Malaysia, and also Brunei, and Thailand being also U.S. ally in the region. So all of these countries are considered to be a very safe base for the U.S. to continue engagement, for example. And even though with U.S. absence in some of those major ASEAN gatherings, because of the leader-to-leader engagement, so bilaterally, so Biden actually helped that a lot, and U.S.-ASEAN actually held a summit in Washington, D.C., which doesn't happen a lot. So if Trump comes back, so this country, because they have experienced during the previous Trump administration. So I'm sure right now every country and every region actually are now preparing for the incoming possible Trump administration. And that is we know that he is unpredictable. So we need to prepare for strategic uncertainty. And this is something that Southeast Asia has been experienced repeatedly since the Cold War era. So we do face not only the United States, but also power, especially like the United Kingdom, withdrawal from the region. So whatever strategic, political, or economic changes, and in fact, the economic concentration has coming back to the region. So we are not too concerned about major powers going away, but actually they are coming back to engage with us.
Professor Lu, what's your take on this? Do you foresee a Trump saying like withdrawing from ASEAN again?
As we noticed, as Professor Hu just mentioned, the East Asia Summit, during the Obama presidency, actually President Obama elevated the meeting and attended the meeting by himself. That is a very high-level engagement with East Asia Summit. And after that, as we can see, Trump refused to go. And then under the Biden administration, it is not only Biden administration held the meeting in Washington, D.C., but also he personally attended 2022 East Asia Summit in Southeast Asia. So as we can see, symbolically, the United States tries very hard to further engage with this region. And also in the context, according to the State Department, they just reveal, by one count, some data. The United States is still the major economic partner to the Indo-Pacific region. So, for example, the State Department argues that the U.S. companies are still the major sources for FDI in this region. And then by one count, it constitutes about $1 trillion US dollars. And then also the United States still constitutes the major trading partner to this region. And the bilateral trade is exceeding $2 trillion US dollars. So as we can see, the United States is going to stay in the Indo-Pacific region according to the Biden administration. And then, and especially just 2 years ago, they just published the Indo-Pacific strategy as the report, as the guideline for its engagement with this region.
So talking about the U.S. presence in ASEAN, now let's shift our focus to China. Over the past few years, China has been working extremely hard to launch a series of policies to court the ASEAN members. And also they have used, for example, like the BRI and also other policies. And they are providing the tariff concessions to ASEAN members. Do you think that China will continue to maintain its advantage in the coming years? Professor Hu.
So RCEP, for example, is one of the largest economic cooperation framework in the world. So combining all the member countries, it constitutes one of the largest market and GDP. So it went into effect since last year. So 2024 is the second year. So we are still yet to see the implementation outcome. But given that all member states sign up to RCEP are very devoted, and especially everyone is still covering from the post-COVID-19 economic revitalization. So this remains part of the very important pillar to Southeast Asia. In ASEAN, so there are several pillars to begin with. One is with the United States, second with China, and the third one is ASEAN itself. So we also have our own community blueprint. And not only that, the fourth pillar consists of multiple stakeholders, including from Japan, South Korea, Australia. So this year we also just celebrated ASEAN-Australia Special Summit. So, and given the fact that semiconductor supply chain is also extended to Southeast Asia right now, so I think there are more and more trade, economic, and business-related deal will be done in this regard. And China has been continued to investing, even though their economic suffer as a result of the COVID-19 outbreak.
I would like to draw our attention back to what Professor Liu said. You talk about the elevated comprehensive partnership, now as comprehensive strategic partnership, and which has been re-emphasized in the 30th ASEAN-China Senior Official Consultation. And they're also trying to promote the ASEAN Free Trade Area, not just 2.0, and now they would like to upgrade that to 3.0. And just echo what Professor Hu said, like the RCEP is such an important mechanism. Do you think that all these economic measures can further secure China's strategic position in ASEAN, Professor Liu?
Yeah, I think in ASEAN, we have to pay attention to the overlapping membership between the RCEP and also the CPTPP. As we can see, we got it here on the left-hand side, the yellow circle. It indicates the members of the RCEP, which has become effective in January 2022. And also we have the CPTPP, the 11 members on this side. And then there are actually 7 countries in between. They are enjoying this kind of overlapping membership. And for the RCEP part, as we can see, because China seems to be playing a heavyweight role in this arrangement. So there are some other countries, for example, India actually drop out from the arrangement. And for the CPTPP, of course, it is mainly due to U.S. domestic politics. So President Trump actually decided to drop out from the TPP, and so that we have 11 countries to further negotiate over this CPTPP arrangement. But the thing is, I would say, as you can see, for many countries in this region, even for economic affairs, they still want to maintain their own flexibility. They feel it is more imperative to secure their national interests so that they can enjoy more freedom, delay their choice or the decision between the United States and China. And in the meantime, they are crossing their fingers, trying to hope that the U.S. and China can reach certain kind of understanding so that the competition won't flee into confrontation. So I believe in the years to come, still, China is going to play a major role in this part of the world. And also, the United States is not sit idly by. Actually, the U.S. proposed to have the IPEF. The IPEF, including 14 countries in total, including the United States in this region. And what is more interesting is, as we can see from the light blue circles, there are so many countries. They are belonging to RCEP, they are belonging to CPTPP, and they are also part of the IPEF. So as we can see, each country is trying its own effort very hard, trying to maintain its freedom of choice among this competition.
Thank you for sharing with us the graphs and also the statistics. I saw a survey that is done by a Singaporean think tank, the ICS Yusof Ishak Institute. So that's the State of Southeast Asian Survey. And they're doing the survey to find out among these ASEAN countries which they are leaning towards to, either China or the US. And for the first time in 5 years, more countries are leaning towards China than the US, just by a very small margin. And there are some clear attitude, for example, like Malaysia, Indonesia, they're more supportive, or you can say leaning towards to China. As for Philippines or Vietnam, they're kind of more pro-US. How do you make of this survey? Do you think this is a real reflection of the situation, or you think, well, this is something, well, we can just have a look? Professor Hu.
Yeah, so I think for the case of Malaysia, so there is a government change. So under the Anwar Ibrahim's administration, so China had a lot of outreach to Malaysia during that time. So given the fact that Malaysia-China is also celebrating 50th diplomatic anniversary this year, so I think that tilt might be understandable, but it doesn't reflect on the overall strategic shift for Malaysia as a whole. So as for Philippines, we all understand that because of the heightened tension over the South China Sea dispute, so that is also an understandable choice as well. So in addition to those political and also strategic factors, again, I think economic outreach that is done by China is also very overwhelming in comparison to the United States. The United States has been a very strong defense and security partner to almost a majority of the Southeast Asian countries. However, for the economic engagement, they lag behind in comparison, but there are specific investment that also goes to a certain countries as well. For example, Vietnam and Malaysia, we do have the semiconductor manufacturing capacity, thereby more US investment go to this country rather than the others, for example.
Professor Lu, what's your take on this?
Yes, I think this is a very interesting survey, I would say. It is interesting in the sense that I believe the Biden administration has successfully established an image. U.S. is here to stay. But as Professor Hu just mentioned, maybe there are some tactical take on this kind of question. But there really are some people in Southeast Asia. They agree that the United States is here to stay, but they further ask the question, for how long the United States is going to stay here? Yeah, especially given the possibilities that Trump may come back to White House. So I believe the U.S. commitment, the U.S. agreement with this region, it is quite important for the United States to be perceived as a stable and a responsible partner into this region.
So, Professor Lu, you just talked about that the U.S. is here to stay. That's a clear message sent by the Biden administration. What do you think of the U.S. backing for the Philippines in this regard? Especially, Professor Hu also talked about the rising tensions in the South China Sea. What kind of signal does that send to the ASEAN members?
Yes, I think China has long engaged in land reclamation in the South China Sea. And especially in recent years, the pace and scope they are asserting their own rights are increasingly aggressive. which actually push other claimants of the issue, leaning more toward the United States for backup. So as we can see in the past few weeks, the tension between the Philippines and China seemed to increase dramatically. And people are worrying about skirmishes or accidents could happen in such a period of time. So as we can see in the past few weeks and past few days, the United States and the Philippines agreed to be more engaged with each other, especially some people are suggesting that there are going to be more U.S. missiles deployment in the disputed area. So I think there are two possibilities. One is the United States is going to shape the new normal in this region. So deployment of missiles on the islands, that's one thing. The second thing is some people are speculating there might be a possible proxy war to happen between the Philippines and China. But to me, I would say the second scenario is less likely to happen because I believe China and the Philippines, they are still trying to play the game of brinksmanship. So they are trying to make the tension serious, but I don't think they really want to let the situation out of control.
So according to the Times of India, a suspected Chinese naval spy ship has been detected in the Indian Ocean. And in response, India has deployed naval vessels to Singapore, aiming to bolster defense cooperation through joint military exercises, military exchanges, and training programs with ASEAN countries, including Singapore, Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines. So it seems that the Sino-Indian relations has sharply deteriorated over the past few years due to the border conflict. And also, how do you think that the strong alliance between India and the United States will have what kind of ramifications on the situation to ASEAN countries? Do you think that the ASEAN countries will remain neutral, not to be affected by India, or do you think that India has a great impact on the ASEAN countries? Professor Hu.
So I think the connection between the Indian Ocean region and Southeast Asia is through the Andaman Sea and also the Strait of Malacca. So those states governing those sea lane of communication like Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia would be affected. So we do pay close attention to the development. And ASEAN, India also have the bilateral institutional engagement as well. So India, we consider them to be a close partner of the United States rather than an ally. So we also have multiple arrangements such as security cooperation in the maritime security area. Southeast Asian experts are often being invited to New Delhi to talk and discuss about maritime security issues affecting both regions. So all of this only mean that Sino-Indian conflict would not be deteriorated in the way that the two major powers understand how having an escalated conflict between the two of them would mean for their respective economic growth as well. So this is why the border skirmishes that happened back in 2020 did not went any further.
Thank you, Professor. What's your take on this? What do you see India's role on ASEAN members? Professor Wu.
Actually, in the past few weeks, India began to be very much worried about the China's expanding influence in that region, especially when the New York Times and along with other media reports revealed the fact that there are some Chinese naval ships, even though they are under the name the ships for science and technology exploration, those kind of things, but to India's mind, it is quite serious because it is very, very close to India geographically. Actually, China has a certain kind of collaboration with Maldives Islands in that region. So for India, Maldives Islands located in the Indian Ocean looks like a backyard to India. So they are worried that China is actually expanding its influence in its backyard. So they became very worried about this. However, in the meantime, there are some new progress in Sino-Indian relationship. For example, there is a newly appointed Chinese ambassador to India, just arrived New Delhi on May 10th to assume the office. That position has been vacant for 18 months, indicating how poor the bilateral relationship was after the 2020 border conflicts. This is very noteworthy, even though some people are saying that, okay, that new ambassador couldn't do too much because the structural interactions between India and China seems to be quite limited and constrained by many other issues. However, I think under the circumstances, the India and the Chinese government agreed to maintain open lines of communication. That is quite important.
So given the power play, or you can say the battle competition between the US and China in Asia or Asia Indo-Pacific region as a whole, do you think that India may arise as the third big player in this region? Is it possible, or will India pose as a threat to China? Professor Hu.
I think India needs to consider how they can have a balanced approach in building up their capacity, because the ability of other major powers to Southeast Asia is their ability to provide capacity building programs, for example. So in the case of the Philippines, not only the United States provide maritime security assistance, Japan, South Korea, Australia are providing their bilateral maritime security related assistance to the country as well. And not just to the Philippines, to the other nations. So far, the only maritime related engagement that India have in Southeast Asia that I'm aware of is Singapore, Vietnam. So maybe increasingly Philippines, because they just purchased BrahMos missiles from India. So I think in a way, India do have to find a niche area for a breakthrough in Southeast Asia. In addition to that is the Indian diaspora factor. So almost in every Southeast Asian country, you can find Indian diaspora. And the same way, you can also find Chinese diaspora in every Southeast Asian countries as well.
Right. I think that's all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for your insights. If you like our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching our show today. Stay safe and see you next time.